The Monday sun did not just rise over Ouagadougou. It glowed like a silent witness, spilling golden fire over rooftops that had seen too many broken promises. Inside the presidential palace, the guards stood like statues, loyal, disciplined, and unaware that today, their president was about to break every rule of protocol. The great bronze doors creaked open. President Ibrahim Traoré stepped out, dressed not as a man of luxury, but as a soldier who never forgot where he came from. His eyes didn't wander toward the gardens or the line of officials waiting for orders. They looked beyond, as toward the horizon, toward the truth he needed to see with his own eyes. He spoke quietly to his driver. "We're not going to any meeting today." Then, "Where, Mr. President?" "To the prison." The driver blinked, half in shock, half in fear. "The prison, sir?" "Without notice." "Yes," Traoré replied, his tone calm but firm. "Today I want to see how my people live. When the world forgets them, no cameras, no entourage, no script, just one man and a mission." The black presidential vehicle rolled out of the palace gates, followed quietly by 2 unmarked cars. The streets of Ouagadougou were just beginning to stir. Vendors opening stalls, children chasing the wind, soldiers saluting without knowing where their leader was headed. 40 minutes later, the city's heartbeat faded into the background. They reached the central correctional center of Ouagadougou, a fortress of cracked gray walls crowned with barbed wire rusting under the merciless sun. The air trembled with heat. And something else, the scent of hopelessness. At the gate, 2 guards froze. "One almost dropped his rifle, Mr. President," he stammered. We weren't informed of your arrival." "I know," Traoré said simply, stepping closer. "That's why I came." Words spread like wildfire. The prison director, Moussa Pascal, came running, his uniform half-buttoned, face dripping sweat. "Sir, if we had known, we would have prepared." Traoré interrupted him without anger, only truth. "I didn't come for preparations. I came for reality. Show me your prisoners." As they walked down a dim corridor, the sound of their footsteps echoed, steady, unhurried, each step cutting through the silence like a drumbeat of truth. The smell of sweat, rust, and despair filled the air. Someone shouted in the distance. Another wept. The walls themselves seemed to breathe sadness. Then, the main cell block opened. Hundreds of faces turned, some filled with confusion, others with disbelief. Card games stopped mid-hand. Whispers melted into silence. The president of Burkina Faso, the same man they saw on television, was standing inside their world, but he didn't keep his distance. He walked among them. He shook hands one by one. He asked simple, human questions. "How long have you been here? Do you still have hope? Do you remember your family's faces?" Some answered in trembling voices. Some stayed silent, too broken to believe this was real. Yet Traoré listened to each story like it mattered. Because to him, it did. He met each pair of eyes, not as a ruler, but as a brother. Minutes turned into nearly an hour. Then in the corner of a shadowed cell, something caught his attention. A man who hadn't moved, didn't speak, didn't even lift his head. The others avoided looking his way, as if he was cursed, forgotten, erased. Traoré stopped. He walked slowly to the bars. The man's face was half hidden in the dark, his skin pale under the dim light, his voice barely alive. Something about that silence struck him deeper than all the cries he'd heard. "You," Traoré said softly. "What's your name?" The man didn't answer. Only the wind whispered through the cracked window. And that's when the story truly began. "What is your name?" Traoré's voice broke the heavy silence, echoing softly off the concrete walls. The man lifted his head, slowly, as if every movement cost him years. His eyes, sunk deep in a face carved by sorrow, finally met the president's. "Emmanuel," he whispered. The name hung in the air like a prayer. Traoré took a slow step closer. "How long have you been here, Emmanuel?" 7 years, sir." The president's brows tightened. 7 years. 7 years in this suffocating place, and the smell of rust, sweat, and forgotten dreams clinging to every breath. "And what was your crime?" Emmanuel swallowed, his throat dry. "They said I stole money from my boss. But it wasn't true." He glanced down, his fingers trembling as if gripping invisible chains. "I worked for him for many years. He wanted to replace me with his nephew. When I refused to resign, he accused me. I had no lawyer. No one believed me. The room went still. Even the guards who had once barked orders now stared silently, their hands frozen mid-gesture. Traore studied Emmanuel's face. He had seen anger, defiance, pride. But this was different. This was the kind of quiet pain that burns without light, the kind that only injustice can create. "Why didn't you appeal?" Traore asked gently. Emmanuel's voice trembled. "I tried, sir, but I had no money. My wife left me. My children were taken away. For 7 years, no one has visited me. Don't even know if they're still alive." A heavy silence fell, so complete that even the air seemed to stop moving. A guard looked down ashamed. Another shifted uncomfortably, blinking back emotion. Traore stood very still. His jaw tightened, not in anger but in sorrow. "I believe you, Emmanuel," the words landed like thunder. For a moment the man's breath hitched, as if those 4 words had cracked the walls that held him prisoner for years. Traore turned sharply to the prison director. "Bring me his file before the end of today. Every detail. I want to know who arrested him, who judged him, and who accused him. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mr. President," Pascal stammered, nodding rapidly. Then Traore looked back at Emmanuel. His voice softened. "Your story isn't over. I give you my word. Justice will find you." As he turned to leave, a strange silence followed him. Not fear this time, but awe. Every prisoner stood. Even those hardened by time felt something stir inside them, something they hadn't felt in years. The black car moved through the streets again. But this time, the man sitting in the back seat wasn't just a president. He was a soldier carrying the weight of a single promise. "Cancel all my appointments," he said. The driver hesitated. "But, sir," "No excuses. A man's life is hanging in the balance." The driver nodded, silent, eyes glistening in the mirror. The air conditioner hummed softly, but it couldn't cool the heat pressing against Traore's chest. He had shaken hands with generals, spoken with world leaders, but Emmanuel's face wouldn't leave his mind. That hollow look, that voice filled with dignity even after everything had been taken. He pressed the intercom. "Bring me the Minister of Justice. Now." Minutes later, Minister Dufy entered, straightening his tie. His face composed and more pretending to be. "Mr. President, you called urgently." Traore leaned forward, elbows on the desk, eyes sharp as a blade. "I visited the central prison this morning." "You did? Personally?" Dufy asked, uneasy. "Yes, and I met a man named Emmanuel. He's been locked up for 7 years, for a crime he insists he didn't commit." The minister adjusted his glasses nervously. "Sir, with all respect, the courts must have... The courts failed him." Traore's voice cut through the room like thunder. The minister froze. "This is not about one man," Traore continued, calmer but firm. "This is about a system that punishes the poor for being powerless. I want Emmanuel's case reopened. I want every name on that file, judge, prosecutor, accuser. Every single one," the minister hesitated. "Mr. President, reopening an old case could..." Traore stood, eyes blazing. "Could what? Expose corruption? Reveal truth? Let it. The people deserve leaders who fear injustice more than scandal." The minister lowered his gaze. His voice softened. "Yes, Mr. President, I'll begin immediately." Traore nodded, his tone final. "Good, because Emmanuel's story isn't just his own. It's the story of hundreds who sit in darkness, forgotten by the very nation that swore to protect them." The minister turned to leave, but Traore's voice stopped him one last time. "And Dufy, don't make me wait. Justice delayed is justice denied." He opened his notebook, wrote a single line. "Leadership means hearing the voices that no one else dares to listen to." He closed it slowly, his reflection flickering in the glass. Somewhere in a dark prison cell, Emmanuel looked up at the small window, a thin beam of sunlight touching his face. For the first time in 7 years, he smiled. He didn't know if he'd ever be free, but he believed again, not just you. Form a new team. Independent, clean, untouched by politics. I want truth, not excuses. Within hours, a special task force was formed. Young lawyers, human rights officers, and 2 journalists known for their honesty. They worked through the night, sifting through dusty court archives and faded witness statements. What they uncovered sent shockwaves through the room. A judge expelled years ago for accepting bribes. An employer, Lauren Gilliard, who had pulled strings to rush the trial. No defense lawyer. A coerced confession signed after hours of threats and beatings. One investigator looked up from the files, his voice breaking. This man wasn't just imprisoned, Mr. President, he was trapped. Traore closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of every word. Then we will set him free. This time, there were cameras, microphones, and an entire country waiting to see what justice looked like when it finally woke up. The heavy prison doors swung open. President Ibrahim Traoré stepped inside the same dark hall he had walked through days ago. But today, light followed him. Emmanuel stood when he saw him, eyes wide, breath short, disbelief trembling in his chest. Traoré's gaze held something new. Not pity, not power, hope. Emmanuel, he said warmly, I have read your file. You were not just falsely accused. You were abandoned by a system meant to defend you. For that I am deeply sorry. Emmanuel's lips quivered. His knees almost gave way. Traoré placed a hand over his heart. You are going home. Today. A gasp rippled through the prison block. Bars rattled. Men shouted. Some wept. Emmanuel blinked, shaking. Is this real? Yes, the president said softly. You are a free man. As Emmanuel stepped through the gates, the light hit his face like a blessing. He had no bag, no shoes, no family waiting, only a trembling heart and a freedom that felt unreal. Reporters surged forward. How do you feel? What will you do now? He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had once signed away his life, and whispered, I don't know. I have no home, no family, no work. But I have hope, and for now, that is enough. Traoré placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You are not alone anymore. The cameras flashed. But the moment was not for the news. It was for history. That night, Emmanuel slept on a real bed for the first time in 7 years. Clean sheets, warm food, silence without fear. He lay on his back, eyes open in the dark, tears running quietly down his face. Freedom was heavier than chains, because it came with memories. He wept until sleep finally took him. Tell me everything, the president said. They sat face to face. Two men from different worlds united by truth. Emmanuel hesitated, then began to speak about his childhood in a small village, his dream to become a teacher, his marriage, and the day everything fell apart. I wanted to educate children, he said, his voice cracking. But life decided otherwise. Traoré leaned forward, his voice steady. Life has changed again, Emmanuel. This time, you decide. A faint smile broke across Emmanuel's face. Fragile, uncertain, but real. The first smile in years. The hall was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Emmanuel stood beside the president, dressed in borrowed clothes, his hands trembling near the microphones. Traoré's voice carried through the room. Calm, but fierce with conviction. Today we correct a mistake. But this is bigger than one man. Our system is broken. No citizen of Burkina Faso should suffer in silence. From this moment forward, justice will not belong only to the powerful. He turned to Emmanuel. This man is not a criminal. He is a survivor. And from today, he will work with us to find others like him. Forgotten by the system. Applause erupted like rain. For the first time, Emmanuel didn't hide his tears. A forgotten man had become a symbol of hope. I want the files of every prisoner who has served more than 5 years. Traoré ordered, especially those who never had a lawyer. The minister hesitated. Mr. President, that would take months. Then start now, Traoré said firmly. One innocent life in prison is one too many. Emmanuel sat alone under a tree, watching the city glow in gold and fire. Freedom, he realized, was not quiet. It was loud, confusing, almost unbearable. A young aide approached, carrying a small notebook and pen. The president thought you might want this, the aide said. On the first page, Emmanuel wrote slowly, 7 years of silence. He stared at the words for a long time, then smiled. He had found his voice. Around the table sat lawyers. prison officials and human rights workers. Traore stood at the head, Emmanuel beside him. Today, the president said, "We listened to voices that were never heard." He nodded to Emmanuel. "Please, tell them." Emmanuel rose. His voice trembled at first, then grew stronger. "I was 28 when I was arrested. The man I served for 8 years accused me of theft. No one asked for my side. I was beaten. I signed a confession I did not write. At my trial, the judge never looked at me. He just read the charges and said, 15 years. Silence filled the room. Even the most senior officials couldn't meet his eyes. "I'm not here to blame," Emmanuel said finally. "I'm here to ask how many others are like me, and who will speak for them." Traore began to clap. One by one, others joined, not out of formality but out of awakening. That day, Emmanuel wasn't just a freed man, he was a voice. Soft golden light touches the marble walls. The flag of Burkina Faso waves in the early breeze. Inside, President Ibrahim Traoré stands by the window, watching the sunrise, his reflection half in light, half in shadow, every morning since that day. He wakes before the sun, because justice does not sleep, not anymore. Stacks of files cover the president's desk. Names, numbers, lives. Across from him sits Minister of Justice Camara. Weary, nervous. "How many reviewed so far?" "Camara, 1,000, sir, but there are thousands more. Some files are missing, others destroyed." Traoré pauses. Eyes steady. "Then we rebuild from memory. If a man's story was erased, we find his voice." The minister nods slowly. He's seeing what kind of leadership this really is. Across the land, whispers turned to movement, and movement became law. For the first time in decades, the forgotten were heard. An old judge reads from a file, voice trembling, case dismissed. A mother collapses into tears, her son, free after 11 years. Emmanuel stands at the back, hands clasped, eyes closed. He feels the weight lifting, one story at a time. Cameras roll as President Traoré visits a bustling marketplace. People cheer, chant his name, but he raises his hand for silence. "Do not thank me. Thank the truth. Thank the courage of men like Emmanuel, who faced darkness and still believed in light." Applause erupts. Some cry, some kneel. Emmanuel sits before a microphone, voice steady. "This is not about me," he says. "It's about every prisoner who still waits for someone to listen." And the country listened. Old wounds began to. The nation once silent began to speak again. A convoy of government vehicles pulls into a dusty village. Children run beside them, waving flags. Emmanuel steps out carrying a box of files. A young man, barely 20, kneels before him. "Sir," he says, tears in his eyes, "my brother was taken 5 years ago. They said he was a thief." Emmanuel opens his notebook. "What's his name?" The boy answers. Emmanuel writes it down, carefully, like carving hope into paper. Traoré sits alone, watching a small TV on screen. Emmanuel visiting prisons, comforting families. The president smiles faintly, proud, tired human. He whispers to himself, "One day, we will not need heroes to find justice. Justice will live in every heart." Thousands gather. Flags, music, chants. A new national holiday, the Day of Justice reborn. The president steps onto the stage beside Emmanuel. Cameras flash, crowds fall silent. "Years ago, I met a man behind bars, a man the world had forgotten, but he reminded me of something powerful. That leadership is not about power. It's about humanity." He turns to Emmanuel. "This man stood in darkness longer than most could survive. Yet he walked out not with hate, but with hope, and that hope rebuilt a nation." The crowd roars. Emmanuel lowers his head, humbled. Sometimes history changes not through war or wealth, but through one act of courage. Emmanuel sits under the same tree where he once wrote, 7 years of silence. Now, the notebook reads, "The silence is over." Traoré joins him quietly. No guards. No press, just 2 men. Do you ever miss the quiet? Sometimes. But I'd rather hear the noise of a country waking up. The president laughs softly. Birds fly across the sunset. Then let's never let it fall asleep again. And so, From the walls of a prison to the halls of power, a single truth echoed through Burkina Faso, that justice delayed is not justice denied, so long as there is someone brave enough to fight for it. A wide, cinematic drone shot of the city below. Lights flicker, alive with new energy. Traore stands overlooking it, coat fluttering in the wind. History will remember leaders for what they built. But legacy. Legacy remembers those who restored what was broken. He looks to the horizon, determined, dedicated to all who still believe in truth.